Want to get this briefing by email? Here's the sign up. Good morning. We're covering a Supreme Court ruling to prevent asylum claims, a call for gun control from business leaders, and tonight's Democratic debate. Court allows barring of asylum seekers. The Supreme Court said on Wednesday that most Central American migrants could be prevented from seeking asylum while the legal fight plays out, a major victory for the Trump administration. A federal appeals court had largely blocked the policy, which requires migrants to first seek asylum in countries they travel through on their way to the U.S. The rules reversed long-standing policies that allowed people to seek haven no matter how they got to the U.S. background. Most asylum seekers who have tried to enter the U.S. this year are migrants from El Salvador, Guatemala and Honduras. What's next? The case will almost certainly return to the Supreme Court, but not for months. Image. There is little conclusive research on the long-term effects of vaping. Credit Mark Michaela for the New York Times. U.S. plans to ban flavored e-cigarettes. Trump administration said on Wednesday that it would prevent the sale of most flavored e-cigarettes as teenage vaping rises. The move comes after nearly 500 cases of vaping-related respiratory illnesses emerged across the country and amid increasing concern about the largely unregulated market of e-cigarette and cannabis vaping products. Background: facing accusations that it was deliberately targeting young people, Juul Labs, the country's dominant e-cigarette seller, announced last year that it would stop shipping most flavored pods, like mango and cucumber. But the administration said that just caused a shift to menthol and mint, which would also be banned. The details: about 1/4 of American high school students reported vaping within the past 30 days, up from 20% last year. The Great Flood of 2019 flooding this year across the Midwest and the South affected nearly 14 million people. To visualize the extent of the disaster, The Times created a composite map showing areas that were inundated at some point from January through June. Related, globally, extreme weather events displaced a record 7 million people during the first 6 months of 2019, according to a report released today, putting it on pace to be one of the most disastrous years in almost 2 decades. Another angle: President Trump, seeking to justify his claim of a hurricane threat to Alabama, pressed for a federal scientific agency to clarify a forecast that contradicted him, according to people familiar with the events. Image. Justify won the Belmont Stakes in June last year, becoming only the 13th Triple Crown winner in the past century. Credit Victor J. Blue for the New York Times. Champion horse failed a drug test last year. Justify won the Triple Crown, one of the most storied achievements in sports. His owners later sold his breeding rights for $60 million. But the Times has learned that the colt failed a drug test and should not have run in the first Triple Crown race, the Kentucky Derby. Instead, the California Horse Racing Board took over a month to confirm test results, then quietly moved to drop the case and change its rules, retroactively clearing the horse. The details: documents reviewed by the Times do not show any evidence of pressure or tampering by Justify's owners. The horse's Hall of Fame trainer, Bob Baffert, didn't respond to multiple attempts to contact him. If you have 12 minutes, this is worth it when classes aren't the hard part of collegiate. Image. Credit Joshua Rashad McFadden for the New York Times. We like to think that landing a coveted college spot is a golden ticket for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. We think less critically about what happens next. In an essay for the Times Magazine, the Harvard professor Anthony Abraham Jack above argues that schools must do more to address the needs of students who come from poverty, as he did. Here's what else is happening. Call for action on guns. Chief executives of some of America's best-known companies are expected to send a letter to Congress today, urging an expansion of background checks to all firearm sales and stronger red flag laws. Democratic debate. The top 10 presidential candidates will be on the same stage for the first time, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Here's what to watch for. Potential opioid settlement. Purdue Pharma and its owners, the Sackler family, have tentatively reached a deal to resolve thousands of lawsuits over the epidemic. U.S.-China trade war. President Trump delayed a planned tariff increase by 2 weeks as a gesture of goodwill. California caps rent. Lawmakers limited annual rent increases statewide to 5% after inflation and put up new barriers to eviction, affecting 8 million residents. The measure is the biggest of several initiatives to address the affordable housing crunch. Gig labor law. Uber said that key provisions in a new California law to protect workers would not apply to its drivers. Image credit. Brittany Newman. The New York Times snapshot above, at the National September 11th Memorial and Museum on Wednesday. Ceremonies in Lower Manhattan, at the Pentagon and in Shanksville Park commemorated the 18th anniversary of the terrorist attacks. In memoriam, T. Boone Pickens, the swashbuckling Texas oil and gas entrepreneur, threatened takeovers of big energy companies and cast himself as a defender of shareholder rights. He died on Wednesday at 91. Trademark request denied. The NBA star LeBron James lost his attempt to trademark the phrase Taco Tuesday, which he uses on Instagram. Separately, it's not the Ohio State University, according to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which denied the school's request to trademark the word "the" late-night comedy. Seth Meyers said it was a shame that President Trump was considering banning flavored vaping products, because vaping was the only way most American kids would ever find out what fruit tastes like. What we're reading, this piece in the New Atlantis. Charles Homans, the politics editor for The Times Magazine, recommends Lawrence Scott's wonderful and probing exploration of the particular nostalgia and melancholy brought on by watching old videos on YouTube, the unexpected emotional places those rabbit hole expeditions can take us. Now, a break from the news. Image credit. David Malosh for the New York Times. Food stylist Vivian Lee. Cook. The sauce for this coconut gochujang glazed chicken also works well with pork ribs or tofu. Watch. In advance of a new film based on Little Women, we spoke to the stars of the 1994 adaptation of Louisa May Alcott's classic novel. Listen. The conductor Theodore Karantzis, anarchist goth guru, has burst out of the Russian provinces and scaled the classical heights. Read books by Paul McCartney, Sonu Sotomayor and Dr. Seuss, incorporating a manuscript in progress discovered by his widow, and new this week on our children's picture book bestseller list. Smarter living. Vitamin D is critical for healthy bones, but high doses may actually lower bone density in healthy adults, a clinical trial found. The study didn't find any increased risk of serious health issues, like cancer or kidney stones. And not all dogs are well-trained pets, even if they're still very good dogs. Here are tips for finding a trainer. And now for the backstory on Garlic the cat. This summer, China put its first indigenous aircraft carrier out for sea trials and launched its first commercial rocket into space. But animal lovers may be more interested in another milestone: China's first cloned cat. Image Garlic, China's first cloned cat. Credit. Hong Kong for the New York Times. The animal was born in July with DNA from a deceased British Shorthair, China's state-controlled news media reported. The owner, a 22-year-old Chinese businessman, had kept the corpse in his refrigerator while waiting for a technician to extract skin cells. The clone was named after the original cat, Dasuan meaning garlic. The owner told our colleague Sui Liwi that the name just came to him. The new garlic's birth solidifies China's position among the major cloning nations, which include Britain, South Korea and the US. Synergeny, the company that did the cloning, has cloned more than 40 dogs and is working on a horse. But Synergen's chief executive says he has never owned a pet. Cats and dogs require too much care, he said. That's it for this briefing. See you next time. Chris. Thank you. Mark Josephson, Eleanor Stanford and Chris Harcum provided the break from the news. Mike Ives, a reporter based in Hong Kong, wrote today's backstory. You can reach the team at briefing@nytimes.com. P.S. We're listening to The Daily. Today's episode is an interview with Andrew Yang, the Democratic presidential candidate. Here's today's mini crossword and a clue. Spooky. 5 letters. You can find all our puzzles here. For the past year, The Times has published weekly reports documenting civilian and military deaths in Afghanistan. 2 reporters in our Kabul bureau explained how they kept track of casualties. Let's block ads. Why?